And India is on track to become the fastest growing large economy with growth rates forecast of between 8 to 8.5%. Optimists say its growing middle class, young population and robust domestic demand is evolving India into a credible investment destination. India also had the second best performing stock market last year, with the Bombay Stock Exchange having the largest number of listed companies in the world. But will the optimistic outlook translate into real growth? Ashishkumar Chauhan is the Managing Director and CEO of the Bombay Stock Exchange and joins us now in the studio. Mr. Chauhan, thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, as we've heard, the Indian Stock Exchange was the second best performing. You must be pleased with that outcome.
Absolutely.
And what do you think contributed to that result?
No, many things, especially over last 4 or 5 years before the new government came. We had a lot of stoppage of large infrastructure projects, and also a lot of economic activity was stopped because of various rules, regulations, and lack of permissions. The new government came with a huge majority, and there was a perception amongst the investors that this government has the mandate and would be able to kickstart some of the stalled projects, and also will be able to get newer sort of transformational projects into the works. And this government has done wonders over the last 1 year. Today is actually the 1 year anniversary of the new government taking over the powers, and they have done wonderfully well in getting people included into the financial system by opening almost 150 million accounts, bank accounts. They also kick-started direct benefit transfers, a lot of job creation activities, infrastructure creation activities. So overall, it has been a good beginning by the government, and that's why the markets have kind of responded positively.
It's almost hard to believe that Narendra Modi has only been in power for a year, because so much has happened in that time. So if you were to give an assessment of how the Prime Minister has performed in that year so far, how would you assess him?
Yeah, for me, what has happened over the last 1 year is basically a creation of a base on which now you can create a growth momentum which can be much higher. As I said, over 4 or 5 years, India had kind of been stalled in terms of the infrastructure projects and many other large projects. Even the consumer demand was slowing down. Inflation was high. The government's deficit was also high. Oil prices were going through the roof. And so last 1 year has seen many of these inflationary pressures coming down. The government's own deficit has come down, and it has been able to create a very transparent framework of utilizing an allocation of natural resources like coal blocks auction, the bandwidth auction, and so on and so forth. So in some sense, somewhere on the line, this government has been able to reduce corruption, reduce inflation, and set in motion a framework which can then take off going forward.
Now, Prime Minister Modi has made several high-profile visits so far, one to the US last year and more recently a couple of weeks ago to China. At the end of that meeting or trip, he signed, I think it was, or companies, Indian and Chinese companies signed $22 billion worth of trade between the two countries. What is it about this government and about Narendra Modi that's been able to kickstart this seemingly big amount of investment internationally?
India basically has been stopping itself from playing a large role on the world stage. India has become a very large economy over the last 10-15 years, but it was traditionally an inward-looking country. It was kind of staying within, and now you have a new Prime Minister who used to be actually the Chief Minister of a smaller state, and nobody gave him sort of confidence that he would be able to completely turn around the foreign policy of India. India needs to basically create almost 15 million new jobs every year for the next 20 years. It needs to create 300 million new jobs over the next 20 years. And for that, it needs to attract investments not only from Indians, but also from abroad. And with the perspective of investing, attracting investments from abroad, he has been kind of touring across the world, meeting world leaders, telling them how good India is and how they can invest in India. And for me, in a sense, it's a kind of a one-man marketing team which has raised India's profile substantially, especially in the investment world. And I believe he's becoming extremely successful in attracting a large number of companies from very high tech to very low tech to come to India and set up the base to take advantage of the favorable political conditions and also the labor that is available in plenty, which is also highly educated. So he's doing a fabulous job on attracting foreign investment through this tour of his.
Now, we've seen many of these headlines over the past year, the billions of dollars worth of investment, the second best performing stock market in the world. But India is also grappling with poverty as well on a large scale. How do those headlines trickle down to that issue, to the people who are poor? Will they translate into, transforming their lives down the track?
Absolutely. The jobs creation is basically maximum important issue. In a sense, the inflation was an issue, corruption was an issue, and third was the job creation. Job creation cannot happen overnight. It has to happen with the investors investing into plants, machineries, in services industry, in hotels, tourism, and so on and so forth. And basically, he has a framework called Make in India for attracting manufacturing companies to India. And manufacturing actually gets a lot of labor involvement, so a lot of poor people can get jobs. Similarly, services industry, India is very good at in information technology, in business process outsourcing, and many other areas. So that needs to be promoted. And the newer technologies that are coming of 3D printing, of nanotechnologies, robotics, life sciences, wearable computers. And so there is a sort of a framework through which all high-tech, medium tech, and low-tech companies are being attracted. And that will give jobs of the primary jobs in terms of those plants and factories, but also the support services of logistics and other things. So effectively, if India has to create new jobs, it has to attract more investments. And that has been proven by him in the state he used to rule for almost 12 years, where he could create huge number of jobs by attracting automobile companies and many other manufacturing companies, including chemicals and pharmaceuticals, which have been doing exceedingly well. And so he has a kind of experience of running a state, and now he's trying to implement that across the country.
Oh, so it sounds like an A+ for Narendra Modi after 1 year so far.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ashishkumar Chauhan, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you again for coming in tonight.
Thank you.